What's up, everybody? My name is Stephen Douglas. I'm about to give my testimony of one of the most controversial figures in American history. I'm talking about the prophet, seer, and revelator, Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was born in the year 1805. I've done a lot of research on his life and what it was all about. Joseph Smith founded the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. And I just wanted to kind of go through his life that I know of. Joseph Smith was born in 1805 in Palmyra, New York. And Palmyra is, his father was a farmer, and they had quite a bit of land. And Joseph Smith's mother and father lived on this farm, and he had a brother, a couple brothers, and a couple sisters. His older brother was Alvin, and he had another brother named Hiram. He might have had other brothers. I do know that he had a few sisters as well. But Joseph Smith's father, I want to talk a little bit about Joseph Smith Sr. Joseph Smith Sr. Had a lot of friends around his farm, and one of the men's farms that was nearby was Willard Chase, and Willard Chase was what you call a money digger, and he had a daughter that believed in seer stones, and Willard Chase had believed that his daughter had special powers to locate treasure under the ground. And they had believed that the hills around Palmyra, New York, contained treasures in them. And so there was a lot of different people in the area that had farms, and they would hire people to look into the seer stone and to find treasure. And so from a very early age, this was the environment that Joseph Smith, growing up, that he was in, is that he would look to his father, and his father believed in money digging, and his father was a money digger, and that they had went on treasure digging hunts with this other woman that was a seer digger. And so they also call them glass lookers, or they would look into a seer stone and locate treasures in the earth, and they believed that these treasures were guarded by spirits, and that the spirits anyway. So long story short, my point in bringing that up is that Joseph Smith, he was one day digging a well for Willard Chase, and as he was digging this hole for the well, he was about 24 feet deep, and this was in the year 1822. 1822, which Joseph Smith would put him about 16 or 17 years old. And he was digging down this well for Willard Chase. He was hired by Willard Chase to dig a well. And he found a brown stone that was shaped like an egg. And he brought it up and showed it to Willard Chase. And he asked Willard Chase, could he keep the stone? And that Joseph Smith believed that it was a seer stone. And so Willard Chase said to him, well, you know what? That's my stone, but you can borrow it. So he borrowed it. And so in the year 1823, Joseph Smith says that he had located a treasure, or golden plates. This was the first that anybody had heard of any golden plates in a nearby hill. also known as the Hill Cumorah, which was a hill that was close to Joseph Smith's house. And Joseph Smith had claimed later that he was visited by an angel or a spirit, and that the spirit told him where the golden plates were that were buried in the hill. And so Joseph Smith told his family that he knew of a record that was buried, a buried treasure, a buried gold record. And his father and a lot of people started to hear that Joseph Smith was claiming that there was a record in the hill. And there were Joseph Smith's name became known, that he had a seer stone, and that he had looked into the seer stone, and that he had found this record in the ground. And so this other guy by the name of Josiah Stoll, which was a really rich farmer, and he had a lot of money. He was a money digger, and he came to meet Joseph Smith. At least that's how I remember it. And he hired Joseph Smith. And in 1824, Joseph Smith said that he was not permitted to obtain the plates, and that the angel was guarding them, and that he wasn't permitted. And so he went with Josiah Stoll up on a treasure digging operation, and they went up and down the river. And Joseph Smith had stories where he had located a treasure up underneath a root of a tree, and that Josiah Stoll would hire men to dig where Joseph Smith would locate these treasures. And he said one time that there was a treasure that was on a chest that was being, and it was down below, and there was a feather on top of the chest, and that Josiah Stoll was digging and found the feather, and that they found the feather, but they couldn't find the chest. And when they asked Joseph Smith, where is the treasure, he said that the treasure had slipped, meaning that these treasures could move under the ground. And so 1824, 1825, they were still money digging, and he was being hired by Josiah Stoll on different areas to dig, and they never found anything. And Joseph Smith said that looking into the seer stone to find these treasures hurt his eyes. And eventually, Joseph Smith met and introduced to a guy by the name of Isaac Hale, which also lived up in Harmony, Pennsylvania. And that's where Joseph Smith met his wife, Emma Hale. He met her, and he was working for Josiah Stoll, and he also worked for a guy by the name of Joseph Knight as a farmhand. And he, during this time of trying to find employment, and Josiah Stoll had spent a lot of money and invested into Joseph Smith, the seer, and the guy that had the seer stone. And so what happened next was that Josiah Stoll had a nephew, and the nephew was pretty upset with Joseph Smith, and so he drafted an affidavit for Joseph Smith being a treasure digger, and that he was a con man, and that he was a disorderly person. And a disorderly person, it was illegal to dig for treasure via a seer stone. And so there was a trial back in 1826, and there's records that have been dug up where they can confirm that Joseph Smith was put on a stand and questioned, and Josiah Stoll said that he was a seer and a prophet, and that matter of fact, there was actually a contract written up between all these different men, and after the trial, and Joseph Smith was what we believe, we can't find a verdict, but we believe that he was acquitted because of Josiah Stoll's testimony that he was a prophet, seer, and revelator, and that in fact he wasn't a disorderly person, that he actually had these powers, and even though they never produced any treasure. And so at this time, Joseph Smith was heavy dating, with Emma Hale, and he ended up against Isaac Hale's wishes. He married Emma Hale, and they eloped, and they got married, and they went back to Palmyra, New York, where the golden plates were. And Joseph Smith, in 1827, he continued with. He said that at one point that he wanted to go back to Harmony, Pennsylvania to get Emma's things and some furniture and things like that, and that he went back and he met with Isaac Hale, and Isaac Hale told him that he didn't want him around because he's a money digger and he's a con man and whatnot. And Joseph Smith said, "I'm giving up all that treasure digging, and I'm repenting, and I'm no longer a treasure digger." But Joseph Smith knew that there was plates in the ground, and that he had this vision of an angel that had appeared to him multiple years in a row to get these golden plates, but he wasn't ready, and the time was not right. So anyway, he reconciled things to a point with Isaac Hale, to where and then Joseph Smith went back in 1827 to the Hill Cumorah, and by this time all the money diggers were after Joseph Smith, because he says he had quit money digging, and they wanted him to find these plates so that they could share them and share the treasure. As a matter of fact, there was a contract that they all drew up, that any treasure that they all found, that they would split it up amongst themselves. And so Joseph Smith, being that he was recently married, and he had promised Isaac Hale, that his wife's father, that he was no longer a money digger. And so all this controversy was floating around, and he was with Emma on a wagon, and they went to get the plates out of the ground in December of 1827. And Joseph Smith went all night long, and he left Emma in the wagon, and she thought that he was going to come back with the plates, with the golden plates that the angel Moroni had given him. And Joseph Smith came back, and he said to Emma that he got the plates, but that he hid them in a log. And so the next day, the money diggers were digging in the hill where Joseph Smith found the plates. And Emma came to him, and Joseph Smith was working on a nearby well. And basically the story that I understand is that Joseph Smith the next day went to get the plates, and when he had them hid in a log in a frock, which was just like a jacket. And he went and got the plates from the Hill Cumorah, from the log that he had hid them in, and he put them in his frock, which was just like a jacket. And he said that on his way to bring the plates home, that he was attacked by several men, including 2 men. And at the home was Josiah Stoll, Joseph Smith Sr., Lucy Mack, Emma, all these people that were friends of Hiram, everybody was there, and Joseph Smith came running in, and he bursted the door open, and he had the golden plates on him, and he came in bloody from the attack, and his finger, his thumb, had been dislocated. And immediately he brought the golden plates in, and he asked to put them in a trunk. And so they had put the plates, they covered the plates, and they and Joseph Smith Sr. and Josiah Stoll went out amongst the night to try to find Joseph Smith's attacker, the people that had attacked him, the money diggers that were after these golden plates. And that they were trying to steal the plates, because they believed that Joseph Smith stole, and that he had found this, and that he's a traitor, and that he's got these plates. And so throughout the time that Joseph Smith had the plates, he had to hide them. He would bury them. He would hide them underneath different people's houses. He would hide them in barns. And it got to a point to where the money diggers and the mobs and everybody was such in an uproar in Palmyra, New York, that he knew that he needed to move, and that he had to take the plates. And so he got his wagon and all of Emma's possessions, and Isaac Hale had said that he could come live with them up in Harmony, Pennsylvania. And so Joseph Smith had hid the plates in his wagon in a rice barrel, and that 1/3 of the way down was the golden plates, and that the rest of the way was filled up with rice. And that along the way that they stopped, and the money diggers searched his wagon and everything, and they couldn't find it. And so he made his way to Harmony, Pennsylvania, where the plates were safe, and the money diggers weren't after him. And that's when he started to first of all, he got kicked out of Isaac Hale's house because he would not show the plates to Isaac Hale. And he said that if you can't show me the plates, then I'm not going to let you live here. You're going to need to find somewhere else to live. And so Joseph Smith had gotten money from Martin Harris, and because Martin Harris believed in the project of the golden plates, and so they began to translate the Book of Mormon. And the Book of Lehi was the first book that they translated, and it dealt with all the way up to Mosiah. And then the plates the manuscript had gotten lost, and Martin Harris had asked to take the transcript, and he took it, and it was lost, and it was 116 pages that had gotten lost. And so Joseph Smith fired Martin Harris as his scribe, and for a time Emma Smith was the scribe, and Joseph Smith would use the spectacles, or the Urim and Thummim, and the Seer stone to translate the Book of Mormon. And he said that he would look into his hat and enclose his face round about the hat, and that it would reveal the characters of the Book of Mormon. And and then Oliver Cowdery became the scribe. And Emma says that Joseph Smith would leave the plates out, and she would clean around the plates, and that she could feel the plates with her hands, and that he had them covered in a cloth, but that she could feel them chink, was the word that she used in a testimony. And that she had witnessed her husband translating and transcribing in a 90-day period the entire Book of Mormon. And the details of what happened after that is that the Book of Mormon came forth in 1830, and the church was organized, and Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith had been visited by angels of the Lord that claimed to be John the Baptist and conferred the Aaronic priesthood upon Joseph Smith the prophet and Oliver Cowdery, and that Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith also were visited by Peter, James, and John, and they had received the Melchizedek priesthood and the keys of the kingdom, and Elijah had appeared, and Joseph Smith started to build temples, and they got kicked out of, and then the saints had to move out because they had gotten, they went to Kirkland and they started to build a temple, and Joseph Smith was just revealing all this doctrine that was lost, the baptisms for the dead. He revealed eternal marriage, and in 1832, Joseph Smith recounted that he had been visited by God the Father and Jesus Christ in the spring of 1820, and this was the first account that Joseph Smith had stated what had happened, is that he was searching for which church to join, and he didn't know which church was right. His mother and his father had different religions, and his father was a money digger, but he believed in God, and his mom was Protestant, and but she had lost her faith for a while because of Alvin, that his brother died, and the preacher said that he was going to hell because he wasn't baptized, and so there was a lot of strife. And Joseph Smith went to pray in the woods in the spring of 1820, and he was revealed God the Father and Jesus Christ, and they told him not to join any of the churches, that they were all false, and that through him that all would be restored. And from the 1820 to 1830, Joseph Smith restored the church, and due to the apostasy. And so the saints were eventually they were chased out of Kirkland, Ohio, and they had to move to Nauvoo, Illinois. And Joseph Smith became the mayor, and he had an army, and they had a bank, and he built this very prosperous town, Nauvoo. And because of his power and political, he was running for president, and Joseph Smith, the man, the seer, the revelator, the author and finisher of the Book of Mormon, the translator of records, and this Joseph Smith was creating such a ruckus throughout the United States that the political parties got to him, and they created a mob, and Joseph Smith was arrested for a disorderly person, and they ended up rushing the jail that he was in, and Joseph Smith was killed. He was shot, and he was martyred in 1844, I believe. He was martyred, and he was killed for what he believed and for the things that he was revealing. And after the killing of Joseph Smith, the church was in disarray, and there was all these people that were saying that they were the rightful heirs, and Emma stayed in Nauvoo, and eventually Brigham Young, the second prophet of the church, was anointed that he would lead the saints to Utah, and that's, everything's history from there. There's a lot of stuff that I left out. There's a lot of stuff that I'm still studying, but I want to let you know that I have a testimony, a firm testimony, that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. I know that. I've prayed about it. I know that he did find the Book of Mormon in the ground, and that the prophets of the Book of Mormon are real, and that Joseph Smith, the prophet, seer, and revelator of the Lord, he was the prophet of the last dispensation. He brung in the millennium. He restored the church. And we are eternally grateful for Joseph Smith the prophet, because he has brought us the fullness of the gospel. And I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet. There ain't no doubt about it. He restored the church. He translated the Book of Mormon. There's a lot that Joseph Smith has done. I know that he was a true prophet. I know that Jesus and Heavenly Father restored the church through him. And that's my 25-minute testimony. And I'm Stephen Douglas. I'm a Mormon. I might not be a perfect Mormon, but I do believe in the prophet Joseph Smith.